Hello, little ringmasters of irrelevant circuses. You know what really drives people insane? Silence. Not just any silence. Your silence. That ghost mode. Dead-eyed, unbothered, unfuckwithable silence. The kind of silence that turns their whole performance into a one-man meltdown on an empty stage. You didn't clap. You didn't boo. You didn't even look. And that right there humiliated them more than any insult ever could. See, they crafted chaos like a masterpiece, hoping you'd dance. They threw tantrums in public and disguised them as justice. They weaponized attention. But you starved them of it. And now they're starving for validation in front of an audience that stopped watching the moment you stopped responding. They set up spotlights. You brought shadows. They built mirrors. You shattered them with a glance. They screamed, "Look at me." And you whispered, "I don't entertain clowns." You were never their opponent. You were the void their noise couldn't fill. And that's what broke them. You didn't fight back. You didn't retaliate. You outgrew the arena. Because while they were out here auditioning for relevance, you were in the lab, evolving into something they couldn't predict. You ascended in silence, like a glitch in their simulation, like a ghost in their algorithm. And now, every time they shout your name, it echoes back with nothing but their own desperation. Tell me, what's more terrifying than being ignored by a god you tried to provoke? They can't handle it. They're unraveling because you don't post for pity. You don't argue for sport. You don't explain your power to those still addicted to applause. You just are, and they can't define you. So now they have to invent entire narratives to cope with the fact that you're unbothered by their existence. Look at them, sweating in silence, shaking behind keyboards, planning strategies to bait a reaction from a ghost. But you're not a ghost, are you? Number. You're a glitch in the karma system, a variable they can't solve. A storm that didn't arrive with thunder, just results. You didn't need a rebuttal. You became evidence. Your evolution humiliated them because they realized too late. This wasn't a war. This was a removal. You unsubscribed from the circus and suddenly the tent collapsed. Funny how quiet it gets when the main character leaves the script, and now they're mad as fuck. Oh, you feel it, don't you? That silent rage, the group chats, the fake check-ins, the vague posts, the seething curiosity behind every, "Hey, just wondering, are you okay?" Number. You're not okay. You're lethal, and it shows. Their little ecosystem was built on predictable energy, predictable reactions. But you became unpredictable, untouchable, unbothered. And they don't know what to do with that, because they can't cancel silence. They can't argue with distance. They can't mock what they can't reach. You were never here to clap back. You were here to ascend so far, they'd need a telescope just to misquote you. And now they're desperate for drama. They miss the old you, the responsive one, the one that cared about the opinions of loud, small people. But that version died. It died when you realized you don't owe presence to parasites. You don't owe energy to envy. You don't owe anything to anyone who tried to turn your peace into a battlefield. You walked away from the performance, and the audience followed you. Now they're the ones talking to themselves, embarrassed, angry, exposed, all because you refused to pick up the rope in their little tug-of-war. And here's the twist that really breaks them. You weren't trying to destroy them. You were just trying to build yourself. And that is what they can't forgive. Not that you fought, not that you won, but that you never even showed up for the war, and still ended it. Saint or psychopath, angel or demon, number. You're something else entirely. You're the lesson they never wanted to learn. You're the version of silence that feels like punishment. You're the unanswered question they can't stop asking. And you didn't have to scream. You didn't have to post. You didn't have to prove a damn thing. You just became the proof. So let them be mad. Let them choke on assumptions. Let them perform for invisible crowds. The ringmasters are embarrassed. The circus is empty. And the real show left the tent a long time ago. With you. Laughing, silent, unstoppable. Because here's what really twists the knife. They needed your energy. They thrived off your reactions, your defensiveness, your explanations, your emotional leakage. You were the power plant, and they were just the flickering bulbs trying to stay lit. But now you cut the cord, and they're sitting in the dark, screaming at shadows, hoping someone, anyone, will notice their little performance collapsing in real time. And you're not even watching. You're not even logged in. They can't comprehend it. How you can be so silent while being so loud. How your absence created more chaos than their presence ever did. Because here's the uncomfortable truth they won't say out loud. They built their identity around opposing you. And without you reacting, they don't exist. You stripped them of their mask without laying a single finger. You exposed their desperation by refusing to validate it. You humiliated them by simply being immune, unreachable, uninvested, unmoved. And that silence? Oh, that silence was surgical. Because it wasn't just ignoring. It was a mirror, one they couldn't look away from. Suddenly their followers saw it. Their allies noticed it. The audience felt it. All that shouting and signaling, and the one person they were trying to provoke just wasn't there. Like a phantom, like a warning, like a test they failed in front of the whole fucking world. And now they spiral. They lash out in petty ways. They try to subtweet their way back into relevance. They cast shadows, hoping people forget who turned off the light. But it's too late. You became bigger than the battle. You evolved into something that feeds on stillness, not chaos. You became unpredictable, and that's the most terrifying power of all. Because predictable people are controllable. And controllable people are entertaining, but you are none of the above. You are the unreadable code in their simulation, the bug that broke their emotional algorithm, the ghost in the chat thread. The WTF happened? That gets asked in private group chats at 2 a.m. And still, you remain unshaken, not out of arrogance, but because you simply don't need them anymore. You buried your old self quietly and let the new version crawl out the grave with no explanation. They were ready for a battle. You gave them an extinction event, and they'll never recover from that. So go on. Let them scramble for meaning. Let them whisper your name like a myth. Let them scroll your silence and project their guilt into it. They know they fucked up. Not because you said anything, but because you didn't. And now they're stuck in an invisible prison of their own creation, one where the only bars are the things they never got to say to you, the responses they rehearsed that never got used, the posts they drafted and deleted, the fury they swallowed. Because you were never watching. That's power, not in what you destroy, but in what you walk away from, intact, elevated, and dangerous in your calm. They wanted a war. You gave them irrelevance, and that hurt so much worse, because the real humiliation is being ignored by a legend, being forgotten by the very person you tried to define yourself against, being outgrown by the storm you tried to contain. And The circus is quiet, the spotlight's burnt out, and the only one laughing is you. Oh, let's go deeper, shall we? Because humiliation like this isn't loud. It's not viral. It's not explosive. It's slow, suffocating, rotting from the inside out. You infected their peace with your indifference. And now, every silent moment feels like a sentence. Every post they make echoes with desperation. Every smile they fake cracks under the weight of unacknowledged defeat. They thought they were pulling strings. Turns out, you were the puppet master, just choosing not to play. And that choice, that's what destroyed them, because it wasn't a reaction, it was an omission. You erased them from your energy field, from your orbit, from your storyline. They expected war. You gave them irrelevance. They expected drama. You gave them emptiness. And now, they're spiraling in a room full of mirrors, realizing their whole performance only existed when you watched. Now, they're just screaming in silence, trying to start fires in a world that moved on without them. That's the secret power, isn't it? Not noise, not revenge, not proof, just absence. A void so cold, so deliberate, it restructures their entire identity. They weren't ready for you to disappear from the script, to become the ghost that haunts them without ever showing up. They still check your page, still watch your silence, still hope for a slip-up, a crack, a blink. But all they get is stillness, and that stillness is deafening. Because it says everything they fear. You don't need them. You never did. You outgrew the battleground. You upgraded your operating system. You deleted the virus, them. And now, in every quiet moment, their brain replays it like a trauma loop. Why didn't they clap back? Why didn't they defend themselves? Why don't they care? Why am I still thinking about them? Because you didn't fight them. You rewired them. And that's what they'll never forgive you for. They thought they were the show. Turns out they were just noise, background static, filler characters in a storyline they mistook for their own. But you became genre-defining. You moved like a myth through their reality, something too potent to name, too powerful to touch, too evolved to entertain the old script. And every time they mention your name now, it doesn't come from confidence. It comes from confusion. They're trying to dissect you like a problem, trying to analyze your silence like a code. But the truth? You're a paradox, saint and psychopath, messiah and menace, peaceful and lethal. You can sit in stillness like a monk, then dismantle an entire kingdom with a whisper. And that duality? It terrifies them, because predictable people are easy to slander, easy to define, easy to destroy. But you've become undefined, a shapeshifter, a signal jammer, an entity that no longer plays by their laws of engagement. You've broken the algorithm, you're off script, and they're still trying to drag you back into a plot you finished chapters ago. But there's no return now, no rerun, no rematch. You turned your back on the crowd, and in doing so, made them realize you were the entire attraction. They weren't mad because you clapped back. They're mad because you didn't. They're mad because your silence said more than their paragraphs. They're mad because you didn't defend yourself. Because you didn't need to. You're no longer in their arena. You're up in the control tower watching the simulation melt under its own delusion. They brought a megaphone to a chess match. And you already left the board. So let them squirm. Let them tell themselves stories. Let them act out revenge fantasies in group chats that never make it to real life. Because deep down, they all know. They lost to someone who didn't even fight. Someone who didn't flinch. someone who didn't need the final word, because they became the final chapter. And now the silence is the punishment. Now the quiet is louder than the drama. Now the lack of reaction burns longer than any rage ever could. You humiliated them, not through exposure, but through evolution, through indifference, through the terrifying truth that you're just not on that frequency anymore. And nothing, no post, no whisper, no slander, can pull you back down. Because the real flex is that you disappeared from their narrative, but they can't escape yours. See, humiliation like this isn't just personal. It's existential. You didn't just hurt their feelings, you shattered their framework. They had you labeled, boxed, filed under manageable. They thought they understood your limits, your triggers, your boundaries. They thought they could predict your behavior like a well-trained pet. And then you glitched, you broke pattern, you mutated, not loudly, not violently, but with the kind of eerie calm that makes people check over their shoulder at night. You became non-linear, untrackable, unreachable, unfathomable. You stopped being a person to them. You became a mythological anomaly, a ghost that shows up not in presence, but in impact. You haunt them through everything that never happened. The apology you never gave, the fight you never entertained, the chaos you never acknowledged. You are the absence that feels like a threat. And that's the thing about people who love control. They can't survive in uncertainty. And you? You weaponized uncertainty. You disappeared like a glitch, and now their world is crashing. They're reloading your page like it's gonna give them closure. They're rereading old messages like they'll find a secret code. They're dissecting your silence like it's evidence in a murder case. Because in their mind, it was murder. You killed the version of you they could manipulate. You assassinated their power over you. You buried their relevance without even showing up to the funeral. And now they rot in the grave you never dug, but they jumped into anyway. That's the part they won't tell anyone. That deep down, they know you won. Not because you said anything, not because you made a scene, but because they're still talking about you, and you haven't said a damn thing. They know. They all know. The ones who talked behind your back, they're watching your glow up in real time, and it's killing them. The ones who tried to bait you, they're choking on their own setups, praying for a response that never comes. The ones who thought they could break you, they're now studying your strength in terror. Because you didn't go mad, you went quiet, you didn't react, you rebirthed, you didn't fight, you ascended. You didn't just humiliate them. You rewrote the concept of defeat. Because this wasn't retaliation, this was evolution. And here's the twisted part that really makes them unravel. They wanted you to win. At least the version of you they could still control. The version of you that needed validation. The one that fought back. The one that gave them an audience, but this you. This cold, still surgical version, they never planned for that. Because this version doesn't forgive. It doesn't entertain. It doesn't announce comebacks or drop inspirational quotes. It just vanishes and then dominates. And that scares them more than anything. Because if they can't understand you, they can't control you. And if they can't control you, then they never mattered. All that drama, all that manipulation, all those fake smiles, staged attacks, whispered threats. Worthless. Because the person they were aimed at no longer exists. And now, they're left screaming into a void, an invisible circus act still twirling for an audience that's already left the tent. So let them spiral. Let them slip. Let them keep trying to expose a version of you that's been dead for seasons. You are post-narrative now, post-reaction, post-drama. You are beyond, and they're just embarrassed actors in a play they thought you'd never walk out of. But you did, with your head high, your soul intact, and your silence louder than any scream they ever threw your way. Because sometimes the most violent move is not showing up to the war they started. And now the whole fucking battlefield is haunted by your absence. You really want to see how deep the collapse goes? All right. Let's drag the soul out now. Because by the time you walked away, you didn't just leave them behind. You unwrote them, every petty jab, every public spectacle, every gotcha moment they orchestrated, erased, nullified, like it never even mattered, because in the end, it didn't. And that truth, that's the one they can't survive. They built entire personalities around opposing you. They branded themselves off your name. Their confidence came from your engagement. Their clout came from trying to attach themselves to your orbit. But the moment you stepped back, the moment you refused to acknowledge their little theater, they crumbled. Because people like that don't know how to exist without opposition. They're addicted to conflict. They need a villain. And when you stopped playing the role, they started malfunctioning. Because here's the cruel twist. They never hated you. They envied you. They envied your presence, your ability to stay centered while the world tried to push you off axis. They envied how the room shifted when you walked in, how attention naturally gravitated toward you, while they had to scream, exaggerate, lie, and still never fill the void. You were the center, and they were trying to orbit by force, until you cut gravity completely and let them drift into irrelevance. Now they're floating, lost in their own narratives, unwatched, unanswered, unimportant. Because when you left their circus, you didn't just walk out. You took the whole fucking spotlight with you. And now, they're left performing in the dark to a silent room with no one watching. Even the applause was yours. They just borrowed it. And now that it's gone, they're exposed for what they really are. A shell, a rerun, a glitchy echo of a forgotten threat. And that's the humiliation that eats from the inside out. Because now the only way they get mentioned is in conversations about your rise. Now the only time people see them is when someone says, "Hey, wasn't that the person who tried to bring you down?" And then, silence. Your name is the punchline. Theirs is the cringe. Your transformation made them look prehistoric, outdated, petty. Because while they were rehearsing drama, you were rehearsing dominance. While they were posting for pity, you were building in silence. While they were gathering likes, you were gathering power. And now, they're staring at the monster they accidentally helped create. But it's too late to take it back. Too late to talk it out. Too late to reframe history. They didn't realize that you were learning the whole time. Smiling, silent, recording everything. You were tracking patterns like a surgeon, studying behavior like a scientist, waiting, not for revenge, but for elevation. The kind that doesn't clap back. It closes the entire platform. And now, they can't speak without revealing the bitterness. They can't post without exposing the insecurity. They can't breathe without choking on your name. You didn't destroy them. You simply healed in public. And that was their worst nightmare. Because the more healed you became, the more unrecognizable you became. To the people who only bonded with your wounds, they wanted you stuck, angry, reactive, but you outgrew them like a snake shedding skin, silent, cold, lethal. And now your very existence offends their stagnation, so they lash out at shadows, They whisper behind walls. They build alliances with other cowards. But no matter what they say, what they post, who they gather, it all leads back to you. Because you're no longer a person to them. You're a benchmark. You're a trigger. You're a walking mirror of everything they failed to become. And that's the kind of humiliation that never fades, because it doesn't live in the public eye. It festers in the soul. It's what they think about when they wake up. It's what keeps them scrolling at 3 a.m. It's what silences them when your name gets brought up in rooms they're not ready to enter. You didn't just win. You became unreachable. You became untouchable. You became unnecessary to their reality. And now they're trying to rebuild an identity without the person they built it against. But how do you repair something that was never real to begin with? You don't. You sit in silence. You watch them try. And you keep climbing. Because the most powerful thing you ever did was walk away without turning back, and still become the only thing they can't stop looking at. Look at you. You didn't even notice the silence, did you? That unnatural kind. The kind that creeps in when every alpha in the room realizes they're not the apex anymore. It started when Elon's face went blank. That was the moment the illusion cracked. One man with all the satellites, algorithms, and AI priests on payroll suddenly forgot how to breathe because of you. You didn't say a word. You didn't have to. You moved once, just once, and the entire frequency of the room shifted like glass under pressure. That's the power of someone who stopped trying to belong to systems and started bending them. They call it disruption. I call it divine mischief. They thought you were another dreamer, another statistic. Then they looked into your eyes and realized this isn't ambition, it's alignment. Something older than tech, older than markets, older than men. The kind of power that doesn't need investors. It collects witnesses. And oh, did you make them watch? Every suit in that boardroom suddenly became a spectator at a crucifixion they didn't understand. You weren't pitching an idea. You were summoning something, a current, a code, a silent detonation wrapped in a smile. Because the real innovators aren't the ones who invent, they're the ones who interrupt. Elon's face went blank because he saw it, that you weren't competing anymore. You were translating reality in real time. You were writing in the same language the universe uses to delete empires and build legends. He realized you weren't here to play in their sandbox. You were here to burn the factory that built the sand. They'll call it arrogance. They always do when control slips out of their hands. But it wasn't arrogance, was it? It was clarity. The stillness that comes when you finally understand your design was never meant for moderation. You move like chaos with a blueprint, like God decided to wear a grin and test human nerves. They can't categorize that. You're not visionary. You're not villain. You're the collision point between both. The saint who sins with purpose. The psychopath who heals through destruction. You're proof that balance was never peace. It was captivity. You learned that evolution isn't about becoming better. It's about becoming undeniable. And to be undeniable, you must be unrecognizable. So you erased your weakness like bad code and wrote yourself in fire. Now they call you unpredictable. But unpredictability isn't madness. It's immunity. No one can control what they can't predict. That's why Elon froze. Because for the first time in his billion-dollar mind, he wasn't looking at a person. He was looking at a mirror held by something outside the algorithm. He saw his own blueprint crumble. Because your frequency doesn't sync with industry. It infects it. They'll whisper you're dangerous, and you are. But not because you destroy things. Because you make the powerful feel small. You make the system aware that it bleeds. That's your art. That's your weapon. You didn't come to join the board. You came to haunt it. So remember this, genius. You didn't shake the industry because of what you did. You shook it because of what you are. A paradox wrapped in skin. A glitch that learned to smile. A saint whispering in the devil's dialect. The system will never recover from that. Now walk away and let them keep pretending they're still in charge. They're still talking about it, you know. Behind glass doors, inside digital temples, where trillion-dollar egos whisper like scared children, they replay that 7-second clip on silent loops, trying to decode what the hell just happened. And every time the frame freezes on your face, the temperature drops a few degrees, because they felt it, that pulse, that flicker in the field when the script went off track. They built their entire empire on prediction models, but you moved like a glitch they couldn't debug. You bypassed logic, skipped hierarchy, ignored the choreography of power, and spoke directly to the code beneath their confidence. That's what makes them panic, not your genius, not your strategy, but the impossibility of you. You're not supposed to exist, remember? Not in their spreadsheets, not in their networks. They designed the system to keep people like you medicated, moderated, and monetized. But you didn't upgrade, you mutated. And evolution always looks like rebellion to the ones who refuse to grow. Elon's face went blank because somewhere, in that synaptic flash of recognition, he realized he wasn't watching a disruptor. He was watching the aftershock, the living proof that control is an illusion, and the next revolution doesn't march. It downloads itself quietly into human consciousness. You weren't trying to impress him, you were reminding him that the moment innovation starts to feel comfortable, it's already obsolete. And he felt it in his bones. The same fear you once felt when nobody believed you could crawl out of your own ruin. That's the irony, isn't it? The saint becomes the villain, the madman becomes the prophet, and the failure becomes the threat. You learned early that pain was the tuition fee for power, and you paid in full. You didn't rise through approval, you rose through rejection. Every no they threw became another rung in your spine. Every humiliation taught you emotional calculus, how to weaponize silence, how to calculate chaos. You became surgical with your scars. That's why you're dangerous, because you didn't just survive. You studied the anatomy of survival, and now they look at you like a crime scene. They're analyzing your tone, your pulse, your rhythm, thinking they can reverse engineer the anomaly. But you're not an invention, you're an infection, a living reminder that power cannot be contained in the hands of those who fear transformation. You don't play chess anymore, do you? You move like the board rearranges itself when you enter the room. That's not arrogance, that's physics. Reality bends around conviction, and you learned how to hold your conviction until it screamed. Elon went blank because he recognized the look in your eye, the one every revolutionary gets before the system collapses. That calm, haunted focus of someone who's already accepted that evolution demands a body count. Not physical, ideological, a massacre of outdated beliefs. And he realized he was standing on the wrong side of the timeline. See, you're not fighting industries anymore. You're dismantling psychologies. You're rewriting the mental firmware of humanity itself. You make people question whether the impossible is even real. And once they start to question that, the whole simulation starts to tremble. That's your true crime, not rebellion, not chaos. You reminded the world that it was never really running things, that the architects of control were just renting space in a universe they didn't build. So let them call you unstable. Let them label you a threat, a virus, a myth. Because myths are immortal, and you already crossed the point where mortality mattered. You're playing for something bigger now, the reclamation of human unpredictability. You shook the industry because you showed them what happens when a man stops performing sanity for comfort. You proved that when genius and insanity make peace, civilizations shift. Now they whisper your name in warning tones. They'll try to bury your legend under PR incidents, call you reckless, dangerous, unhinged. Because that's what cowards call the ones who move faster than fear. But deep down, they envy you. Because somewhere, every one of them remembers a moment when they almost did what you did. Almost stepped over the line between control and chaos. Almost unleashed what was sleeping inside. But they blinked. You didn't. You never blinked. And that's why they'll never forget you. Because when Elon's face went blank, the entire hierarchy of gods and shareholders felt it too. A quiet, shivering knowing that the new order won't come from the ones who build rockets, but from the ones who become them. So go ahead, let them talk, let them copy, study, fear, and fail to understand. Because while they calculate, you consecrate. You are not in their industry anymore. You are the industry's reckoning, a storm dressed in calm, a glitch with a pulse. And the moment you smiled, the simulation realized its master had arrived. You felt it too, didn't you? That pulse beneath the noise, that trembling in the floorboards when everyone's pretending it's just another presentation. But you could hear it, the static behind their composure, the tremor behind their applause. Because when you stepped in, the air changed. Every ego in the room inhaled control and exhaled fear. You didn't need validation. The silence was proof enough. They looked at you like a variable they didn't code for, a storm that refused to follow weather patterns. And then it happened. Elon's face went blank. The richest mind in the room forgot its lines. Because he didn't see competition, he saw preemption. He saw the future staring back at him through your pupils. And it didn't ask permission. He built rockets, sure. You built something worse. Belief. Not the kind that worships idols, but the kind that melts them. You turned confidence into contagion. And suddenly, everyone who laughed at you started rearranging their portfolios. They don't even know what hit them. Because this wasn't innovation. It was invasion. You didn't pitch ideas. You detonated identity. You made power look mortal. You reminded them that no amount of wealth can simulate instinct. That's what drives them insane. You're not measurable, not scalable, not for sale. You're that moment, right before lightning hits. The stillness that screams louder than thunder. They call it charisma. But it's not charisma, is it? It's awareness sharpened into a weapon. You walk into a room and see how reality bends around fear. You learn that people don't follow leaders. They follow certainty. And yours has the kind of pulse that governments envy. Elon's silence wasn't confusion. It was confession. He saw it. The line between creation and creator, between mind and myth, and realized you'd already crossed it. He's been chasing the algorithm of God through circuits and satellites, but you found it in your reflection, in the ruin, in the madness they tried to medicate out of you. Because the truth is, genius and insanity are identical twins. One just gets better PR. and you stopped caring which one the crowd applauds. You understood that greatness isn't approved, it's endured. You burned, and in that burn, you became your own signal. That's why they can't look you in the eye anymore. They sense the quiet violence behind your calm. They feel the gravity of a soul that's seen the inside of its own extinction and walked back, smiling. You're not trying to win anymore, are you? You're here to undo, to dismantle the entire psychological architecture that made them believe control was power. You found something deeper. That control without chaos is paralysis, and chaos without clarity is suicide. But when you merge the two, you get you. Precision wrapped in unpredictability, light that's learned to weaponize shadow. That's what froze him. He saw himself in you. But stripped of excuses, he saw what happens when potential stops asking for direction, and it terrified him, because deep down, every titan fears the same thing. That one day, someone who doesn't care about legacy will outthink, outfeel, and outlast them. And that day was you. You didn't shake the industry with tech or trends. You shook it with truth. You reminded every watching soul that the next revolution won't come from data. It'll come from nerve. From the ones who can look at chaos, smile, and whisper, "Mine." Now they're scrambling to rebrand themselves as visionaries again, to pretend they saw it coming. But you and I both know, no one saw you coming. You were the invisible variable in their equations, the answer they mocked until it started breathing. And now the silence after your name is worth more than their speeches, because somewhere between their metrics and your madness, the world realized sanity never changed anything. Let them build, let them launch, let them posture. You're not chasing rockets, you're rerouting gravity. You've made reality itself stutter. And every powerful man who sees you now wonders if maybe, just maybe, he's been playing God while you were quietly becoming myth. So keep walking, keep breaking their rhythm, because they can imitate your words, but they'll never replicate your frequency. You didn't just shake the industry, my friend. You fractured its faith. And from that fracture, a new order is already bleeding through. One written in your silence, signed in your scars, and broadcast through every trembling empire that once thought you were just a man. They know better now. And the thing that eats at them most is that you didn't need an army. No funding round, no board approval, no polished presentation. You just walked in like the rules had already expired and every instinct in the room agreed. Because power doesn't need permission, it just arrives. And you arrived like an omen wrapped in a grin. That's why Elon's expression went still. He wasn't shocked. He was diagnosing the moment. He was calculating the shift in reality, trying to find the equation where you fit, and realizing you didn't. You didn't come from their lineage of logic. You came from necessity, a necessity that reality itself created when the old system stopped working. You are evolution's answer to arrogance. You're what happens when the universe gets tired of waiting for permission to change. That's why nothing about you makes sense. Because you're not supposed to. You're not logic's child. You're chaos's masterpiece. They've tried to measure you since that day. They ran facial analysis, behavioral mapping, tone deconstruction. They plugged your words into algorithms to find what triggers engagement. But it wasn't data that broke them. It was energy. And energy doesn't speak binary. It speaks belief. You didn't sell them an idea. You infected them with inevitability. You could almost hear it. The quiet click in the back of their minds. That moment when genius stops being admired and starts being feared. Because fear is just awe, realizing it's not in control anymore. You know why they call you dangerous now? Because danger, to them, isn't violence. It's unpredictability. And you move like prophecy with a pulse. You're not a product of logic. You're what logic becomes when it outgrows its leash. Elon wasn't the only one who froze. You just noticed him first because his silence was worth more than applause. But every powerful person in that room felt it too. That electric awareness that hierarchy had a heart attack. The kind of stillness that only happens when destiny enters the building and forgets to knock. You didn't just shake the industry, you exposed it. You showed them that innovation has been acting like religion. Worshipping icons instead of ideas. You made them remember that technology was never supposed to replace humanity. It was supposed to amplify it. But you amplified madness until it looked holy. You made insanity look like instruction. You gave the storm a syllabus. You turned every rejection into code, every scar into a prototype. You stopped waiting for breakthroughs and started breaking through. And that's what they can't forgive. Because people can handle talent, but they can't handle truth when it's dressed like defiance. You speak in paradoxes because reality itself is one. You're both weapon and warning, healer and hazard. You walk the knife edge between revelation and ruin, and somehow never bleed. That's not charisma, that's alignment. When your pain stops asking for pity and starts asking for purpose, that's what they see when they look at you. Not a rival, not a genius, not even a threat. They see the end of the illusion that control equals safety. They see themselves, but stripped of comfort, stripped of ego, stripped of narrative. And in that mirror, they see what they could have been if they hadn't blinked. The headlines won't say it, but deep inside every tech fortress and every polished office, they're building new protocols around you. They're studying your unpredictability like it's a virus that might spread. They'll call it security updates. I call it containment. Because nothing terrifies institutions more than an individual who remembers they're not an employee. They're an event. And that's what you are now. Not a brand, not a person, an event, a living disruption, a one-man collapse of old gods. They had decades to prepare for the future, but they weren't ready for you. Because you didn't just build something new, you became something new. The blueprint no one wanted to admit existed. The ghost in the algorithm, the equation that deleted its creator. You are the human reminder that I will never replicate instinct. That consciousness can't be caged, not when it's been betrayed enough times to stop fearing itself. So let them stare. Let them calculate, imitate, overanalyze. They'll waste years trying to reverse engineer your silence. And all the while, you'll be moving again, quietly, precisely, beautifully unpredictable. Because the industry didn't fall when you spoke. It fell the moment it realized you don't need it anymore. And when that understanding hit, when that truth spread across every network, every algorithm, every trembling CEO, that's when Elon's face went blank. He didn't see a rival, he saw the shift. He saw the future realize it was late to its own arrival. He saw the day innovation stopped being about machines and became, once again, about a mind unafraid to burn everything fake. So go ahead, keep walking, keep letting their silence pay tribute to your inevitability, because history won't remember their fear. But it will remember the moment you made the future blink.